what was to be this crisis? You know, he didn't. The first time that he said the word coronavirus wasn't until the stock market crashed. And all along, he's playing these very partisan political games, even now when Kentucky and America needs more aid. That's not what you're going to get from me. I have a plan to get us through this coronavirus so that our schools are opened up safely, so that we get our economy back, and stop playing these games. To this day, Senator McConnell still doesn't have a plan, a national testing and tracing plan, and he's not going to do what's right for our country.
It's time, Senator McConnell.
Well, Bill, I want to start by congratulating Colonel McGrath for her service in the military. It's been my privilege to nominate 131 Kentucky women to have the same opportunity she did. I also was involved in making it possible for women in the military to go into different jobs, like being able to fly in combat. With regard to the question you asked, what I did was shepherd through the Senate an almost $3 trillion coronavirus relief bill, which has provided $13 billion for Kentucky, over $1 billion for hospitals and healthcare providers. And I'm trying to be a good example, too. When we went back in session in the Senate in May, I was the one who said we need to wear masks, practice social distancing. Dr. Fauci's made it clear that coronavirus is not going away, and we need to practice distancing and masks until we finally get a vaccine and can put this in the rearview mirror.
Time's up, Senator. And Lieutenant Colonel McGrath, you have a rebuttal.
Sure. Well, Senator McConnell, that legislation was passed back in March. And here we are, this coronavirus is still happening. The House put up legislation in May, and it's been sitting on his desk all summer long. He took a vacation, didn't see the urgency to do anything. Meanwhile, here in Kentucky, we have 1 million Kentuckians that are filed for unemployment sometime in the last 6 months. We have 300,000 Kentuckians that still don't have health care in the middle of a coronavirus. And he's walking away from negotiations even now when President Trump even wants negotiations to happen before this election. It's irresponsible.
Senator McConnell.
Well, what she supported after the CARES Act was the so-called HEROES bill over in the House, $3 trillion, and which included in it, by the way, tax cuts for rich people in New York and California, health care for illegal immigrants. And by the way, that bill that she supported, that they passed in the House after the CARES Act, provided more money for Puerto Rico than it did for Kentucky. In spite of her best effort, she's a national Democrat. She is in line with Schumer and Pelosi and all the rest on all of these issues.
For Kentuckians, President Trump and Governor Andy Beshear are the two most important voices that they hear regarding COVID-19, and the messages are very often different. How would you rate their handling of the historic health crisis that we now face? Senator McConnell?
Well, I think they've both done the best they can with an unknown disease that we were all trying to figure out how to handle. Imagine the situation we had in early March when Dr. Fauci recommended we shut down the economy in order to deal with the healthcare pandemic. So we were confronted with a combination of problems. A healthcare emergency and a shutdown economy at the same time. What to do? Well, the CARES Act began in my office. We drafted it, built it out, appealed to the Democrats and the administration, and literally flooded the zone with ultimately $3 trillion to both deal with the healthcare pandemic and the economic crisis created by shutting down the government. And we learned some lessons. Dr. Fauci's indicated we're not going to shut the economy down again. I agree with it. It created a whole different set of problems. So in the meantime, what we have to do until we get a vaccine is to wear our masks, practice social distancing, and try to prevent the spread.
Senator, thank you. Lieutenant Colonel McGrath.
Well, I give the president, the White House, and this Congress an F for its handling of coronavirus. Look, we have 213,000 Americans dead in 9 months. That's more Americans dead than World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Persian Gulf War, Iraq and Afghanistan wars combined. And Senator McConnell thinks we've done a good job. We have 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's COVID cases. And we still have a president in mixed messages from this White House on how to handle this virus. And Senator McConnell, his one job is to help America through this crisis right now in passing legislation to keep our economy afloat so that people can make ends meet. And instead of doing that, he is trying to ram through a Supreme Court nominee right now, instead of negotiating, which is what he should have been doing all summer long to make that happen.
Senator, do you have an additional response?
Well, what you wanted us to pass was the bill that provided health care for illegals, tax cuts for rich people in New York and California, and had more money in it for Puerto Rico than for Kentucky. Yeah, we've been negotiating, trying to put something reasonable together that actually attacks the problem. I laid out a bill in the Senate about a month ago that provided liability protection so that people didn't get sued as a result of how they handled this. Kids in school, jobs, health care. We couldn't get a single Democrat to vote for it. So it's pretty clear to me that her party doesn't want to get a solution.
Senator Time, Lieutenant Colonel.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So Senator McConnell 3 years ago had no problems ramming through, working overtime to pass a $2 trillion tax cut for the wealthiest 1% in corporations. But now when it comes to Kentucky families, when it comes to putting food on the table, when it comes to renters, that 40% of Kentucky renters are facing eviction right now, he won't pass the $2 trillion that even President Trump wants done right now. I mean, $2 trillion for corporations, no problem. $2 trillion for Kentucky in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a national crisis that we haven't seen in 100 years, nah, that's too hard.
All right, let's really get in it, because you both made glancing references to the economic activity and the problem that we have right now, and the trouble with getting a deal. And the pandemic has had a devastating impact on our economy, and we're all well aware of that. A $600 federal boost to unemployment benefits ended. A loan forgiveness program for small businesses expired. Airlines have started mass layoffs as federal payroll assistance programs have ended as well. So this question, which comes from a University of Kentucky student, and we're privileged to have their perspective tonight, where do you stand on negotiations on a second stimulus bill? And we begin with Lieutenant Colonel McGrath.
Well, as I said before, I think it's an absolute dereliction of duty to not be negotiating and working on this. You know, this is the first time in a century, in 100 years, where we have a major international crisis, where no one in the world is looking to the United States for leadership. Think about that. It's because we have such poor leaders right now. Can't get this coronavirus under control. And the one thing that our Senate is supposed to do is to help people right now. And here's the problem. Senator McConnell built a Senate that is so dysfunctional and so partisan that even in the middle of a national crisis, you can't get it done. Think about that. For that reason alone, he should be voted out of office. We've got to get our democracy back again. We've got to get our democracy working, because we have to get through this crisis right now.
That's your time. Senator McConnell.
Well, my opponent's entitled to her opinion, but not to her own set of facts. I mean, here's the situation. We've been in negotiation with the Speaker. She's been demanding we throw $3 trillion at this problem in a way that is largely, in many respects, unrelated to solving the problem. What we've been trying to do is to reach an agreement. When you have divided government, you actually have to reach an agreement. And the Speaker has been totally unreasonable and not interested in getting an outcome, as we've tried and tried and tried. As I just said a few minutes ago, I put a bill on the floor of $500 billion, a lot of money, about a month ago, to tackle this problem in a highly targeted way, going after vaccines, treatment, testing, and we couldn't get a single Democrat to vote for it. I think they don't want a solution prior to the election.
Lieutenant Colonel McGrath, 30 seconds.
All I would just say is, all summer long, Senator McConnell didn't see the urgency of doing anything and even negotiating. And here's the thing, he sits here and he says it's too hard. It's too hard to negotiate, too hard to get it done. basically saying, you know, that's too hard for him. That's not hard to do what's right for America. It's not hard. I'll tell you what's hard. Strap on a $70 million jet to your back, land it on an aircraft carrier, 150 miles an hour at night in bad weather with no navigation lanes. That's hard. Doing what's right for the American public in the middle of a national crisis, not hard.
Senator McConnell, you have an additional response?
When you have divided government, there has to be a willingness on both sides to get an agreement. And the Speaker of the House has clearly not been interested in getting an outcome. That's why the talks have gone on for a while. She just chooses to blame the Republican Senate when obviously the biggest part of the problem has been the Democratic House. If I'm here watching this debate, I'm saying, why can't you guys get together? And I think the answer is the proximity to the election has slowed the process. And that's unfortunate for the country. It's unacceptable. But she wants to cast all the blame on the Senate.
I mean,
go ahead. I'll give you all a second.
The House passed a bill in May, and the Senate went on vacation. I mean, you just don't do that. You negotiate. Senator, it is a national crisis. You knew that the coronavirus wasn't going to end at the end of July. We knew this. I mean, I just think you've got to. And here's the thing: if you want to call yourself a leader, if you want to call yourself a leader, you got to get things done. And those of us that served in the Marines, we don't just point fingers at the other side. We get the job done.
Yeah, nobody went on vacation, except the House was gone most of the time, but nobody went on vacation. We actually can do things like use telephones. We communicate with each other a lot. The challenge here was the Speaker was simply unwilling to cooperate to the extent that we could get a reasonable proposal. The Secretary of the Treasury, delegated by the President to talk to her, went on and on and on for months. And I think we've belabored this point pretty thoroughly, Bill. It seems to me she thinks we're the problem. I think they're the problem. What we need is a solution. Well, the way you get a solution is the way.
Well, I was going to say, we know we have a problem, and it is continuing. And so is the pandemic continuing. In fact, it appears we have an escalation in many of our states. And as the pandemic continues and winter and flu season are approaching, what is the appropriate balance between keeping the economy open, students in school, if they can be, and protecting the health of Americans? Senator McConnell?
Well, the single biggest thing is this is not going to be put in the rearview mirror until we get a vaccine. For those of you who are familiar with World War II history, we had the Manhattan Project to try to get the atom bomb as quickly as we could to avoid having to invade Japan. We have a Manhattan Project underway to get a vaccine. Some of our major pharmaceutical companies are already producing doses even before the clinical trials are proved out. We're going to get a vaccine in the most rapid period of time that this has ever been done without cutting any corners. And the honest answer, Bill, is until we get a vaccine, we can't entirely put this behind us. We've got a resurgence here in Kentucky, a resurgence around the country. The vaccine is not going to, the coronavirus is not going to go away until we can kill it. And it's going to take the vaccine to do that.
Lieutenant Colonel McGrath.
Well, certainly the coronavirus is not going to go away until we get a vaccine, but we still have the worst trajectory of first world countries when it comes to the coronavirus. And there are other countries that have been able to get this under control, and they've done it with a national testing and tracing plan that we still don't have in this country. This virus was so bungled at the federal level that we literally had states and communities fighting each other for personal protective equipment. There's like no leadership at all. So what do we need? What do we need? We need immediate aid right now that unfortunately Senator McConnell doesn't want to work on. But we need unemployment insurance from those people, an extension of that for those people who have been thrown off their work from no fault of their own. We need things like another round of PPP money for small businesses right now. We need a testing and tracing plan. I can't believe 9 months into this thing, I'm still saying that. And frankly, we need leadership at the very top to talk to us, to tell us the truth. about this virus and how deadly it is.
Time on that. Senator, anything to add to the
Yeah,
that
look,
discussion?
I know how to make deals. I made 3 major deals with Joe Biden during the Obama era. What the problem here has been an unwillingness by the speaker to make a deal. We can spend the whole debate on this if we want to, but she wants to blame the Republican Senate. I think it's been clearly the case that it's the Democratic Speaker of the House. But there are some other issues going on here, like a new Supreme Court
We're going to
justice
get to that.
that we might want to cover at some point.
We will. And Lieutenant Colonel McGrath, if you want to.
Yeah,
second
sure. Look, I was a United States Marine for 20 years. When you go into combat, you don't make excuses. You get the job done. You're the Senate Majority Leader. He's the Senate Majority Leader. And all he can do right now is make excuses in the middle of a national crisis. He has built a Senate, what was once the greatest deliberative body in the world, cannot even function in the middle of a national crisis. And it's because of what he's built. That's why we gotta get rid of it.
All right, this morning, the Senate Judiciary Committee began confirmation hearings for Supreme Court Justice nominee Amy Coney Barrett. This is on the minds of many people and, as it turns out, many UK students when we asked them to submit their questions. And so one of the students asked, should the confirmation hearings be happening this close to an election when early voting is already underway? Lieutenant Colonel McGrath.
No, that's the short answer. Nobody should be voting on a Supreme Court nominee right now. Look, 4 years ago, Senator McConnell said by the McConnell rule during an election year, we don't vote on a nominee, let the people decide. Well, right now, with 22 days to an election, we should let the people decide. And what's really important is that we should be focusing on aid for Kentucky, as we just talked about, and not a Supreme Court nominee. But let's be clear about what this is all about. Senator McConnell, for a decade, tried to undermine and get rid of the Affordable Care Act legislatively. He could not do it. So now he is trying to do it in the courts. The first case that the Supreme Court is going to hear after the election is going to be about the Affordable Care Act. And that is something that we really cannot have in Kentucky, because the Affordable Care Act did a lot of good for many, many Kentuckians. And so I don't want to throw it away. I want to fix it.
Time's up. Senator McConnell.
Yeah, no one believes the Supreme Court is going to strike down the Affordable Care Act. What this is really about is trying to change the subject away from this extraordinary nominee who's before the Senate. An outstanding woman, an accomplished scholar, a judge on the 7th Circuit, a marvelous family, 7 children, 2 of them adopted, 1 of them with special needs, an absolute legal all-star. And so in the Judiciary Committee, you saw today, they want to talk about anything other than the nominee. This is the progressive position. My opponent said she's the most progressive person in Kentucky. What does that mean? That means they want to stack the Supreme Court. In other words, add numbers so they can get an outcome they like. She wants to make the District of Columbia a state, Puerto Rico a state, get rid of the filibuster in the Senate. In short, there's not a dime's worth of difference between my opponent and all the national Democrats that you've watched. If you give them control of the government, that's what they'll do.
Lieutenant Colonel McGrath, an additional response?
Well, I want to do what's right for Kentucky, always. That's what I'm all about. You know, and after 36 years in Washington, this is what you get. A man who basically, his word means nothing. Integrity means nothing. Does one thing 4 years ago, then just changes his mind and makes up an excuse the next 4 years. You know, it's what everybody hates about Washington. Folks, we cannot change Washington until we change the people we send there, period.
Senator McConnell, additional response?
Yeah, you know, have you seen those ads she runs about the swamp? Washington is the swamp. Well, she wants to give the swamp a place where they're full of influence peddlers and lobbyists, 2 senators, just like Kentucky. That's one of the things she's in favor of. That's why she's one of the most, if not the most progressive person in Kentucky. They want to completely change the rules in the Senate to give them an advantage. Admit the district and the state. Puerto Rico is the state. That's 4 new senators for them. and then pack the Supreme Court so they'll get the outcomes they want that they can't pass through the Congress.
You want to respond?
I would just say that, Senator McConnell is lying to you about my stances, and, but that's par for the course.
Would you favor enlarging the court?
I think we should be working on unpacking the Senate right now, because he has polarized and made this partisan mess of the Supreme Court so bad that people were even saying they were going to vote for or against the nominee before they even had the name. And in my mind, that's just not what we should be looking at. I'm focused on Kentucky.
Yeah, you notice she won't answer the question, and Joe Biden won't answer the question either. What Biden said is, I'll tell you after the election whether or not he's going to pass the Supreme Court. Well, we're entitled to know now whether you're going to pass the Supreme Court. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who we all revere, said in an interview last year, 9 is the right number. 9 is the right number according to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's been 9 since 1869.
Except for the 1 year that you left 8 all year long. But here's the thing. Ruth Bader Ginsburg also said that she didn't think that her seat should be filled until the next president. And it does come down to this. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg was initially nominated and confirmed, she was confirmed 96-3 at the time. Think about that. Mitch McConnell wasn't the Senate Majority Leader then, so we actually had regular order. Since he's become the leader, he has made this a partisan, complete weapon of a mess that we have with the Supreme Court. We gotta get rid of him.
Senator,
Every one of the big Supreme Court controversies was started by her party. Bork, Thomas, Kavanaugh. Look what they did to Kavanaugh a year ago. Tried to destroy his reputation. Look, under the Constitution, the president can nominate for a vacancy on the Supreme Court anytime he so chooses. And this president has for a vacancy during an election year, just like a lot of other presidents have over the years. 19 times. 17 of the times they've been confirmed when you had the party of the president also in control of the Senate.
I'm not going to leave this general topic, but this question is this. If Judge Barrett is confirmed, there is some belief that Roe versus Wade, the law that gives women the right to an abortion, could be overturned. And a Western Kentucky University student wants to know your thoughts on that, and where do you stand on women's reproductive health issues? And we begin with Senator McConnell.
Well, I'm pro-life myself, and enjoy the support of Right to Life and the Susan B. Anthony list and others who've worked on this issue over the years. But that's a different issue than what's before the Supreme Court. Every president has been surprised by how the Supreme Court nominees that they've put up have voted. No one knows what may happen with any nominee. Every Republican nominee has been projected to be a disaster for women, and none of them have turned out that way. So we don't know how the court may rule. I suspect this nominee, just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, will not answer any question about a case that might come before her. So we will not know. That's one of the reasons judges have a lifetime appointment. They're independent once they get on the court. If they're strict constructionists, they follow the Constitution and the law.
Time's up. Lieutenant Colonel McGrath.
Well, I'm Catholic, and I'm the mother of 3 small children, and this issue has been an important issue to me my whole life. I'm somebody that believes that the government should not be legislating my religion or my religious belief on others. And I do believe we already have reasonable restrictions on abortion in this country, as per outlined in Roe v. Wade. That said, as probably, I am the only woman up here on this stage today and the only mother, I'd like to point out that if you're talking about life issues, you have to talk about the fact that before the Affordable Care Act in Kentucky, there was not a single insurer in the individual market that would cover maternity care. And Senator McConnell has had a terrible record of trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act all along. 50% of children born in Kentucky and rural Kentucky are born on Medicaid. And Senator McConnell wants to cut that. Those are life programs. And, as a mother, I always want to protect children, and protect,
Senator
health care for people.
Senator, additional
Well,
response.
speaking of healthcare, what she really wants and came out for was a single payer system. That means the government is in charge of your healthcare. And then she waffled a little bit and said a public option. There's really not a dime's worth of difference. If you put all of our healthcare in the hands of the government, think about it this way. If you went down to the Department of Motor Vehicles and asked them to build you a Corvette, do you think it'll work out too well? That's what we're talking about here. You don't want the federal government to be entirely in charge of looking for testing, vaccines, treatment, and the long lines that will come as a result of the government taking over. That's where they really want to go. They're disappointed in Obamacare. They think it didn't go far enough. They want to go the whole way and put all of our health care in the hands of the government.
Time, Senator Lieutenant Colonel McGrath.
I'm not sure what the senator's talking about when he talks about they. I can tell you where I stand, and that I ran the primary and defeated my opponents that were for the Medicare for All system. But clearly we need to fix healthcare in this country. We have 300,000 Kentuckians that still don't have healthcare in the middle of a pandemic. And Senator McConnell, 30 years ago ran an ad that said that he was going to fix healthcare. Now he's saying he just needs another 6 years to do it? Seriously? That's like my 8-year-old son saying, hey mom, I really am going to take out the trash, but I just need another 6 years. He's not interested in fixing healthcare.
Early voting starts in the Commonwealth of Kentucky tomorrow, and more than 650,000 Kentuckians have requested absentee ballots across the country. There are questions over mail-in voting and the potential for fraud. Are you concerned about the integrity of this election, Lieutenant Colonel McGrath?
I think that we have, here in Kentucky, we have a Democratic governor who came together with a Republican Secretary of State, and they came up with a very good plan for everybody to vote. And it's wonderful. They actually came together and negotiated. Isn't that amazing? I wish we could do that at the federal level. But I think that Kentucky has never made it easier to vote than this year, and that's incredible. Early voting starts tomorrow. I am very concerned about the U.S. Postal Service. The Postal Service is such an important service. It provides prescription medication to our seniors, to our veterans, particularly in rural areas, and it needs to be helped through this coronavirus. And I'm afraid Senator McConnell hasn't done enough for that, and I would be helping our Postal Service, because let's face it, if you can hand out $500 billion in slush funds for a corporation, you should be able to turn around and help everyday people. And one of the ways is to help our Postal Service.
Time. Senator McConnell, your response.
Yeah, my opponent always likes to mention how long I've been in the Senate. She doesn't seem to be troubled by the fact that Joe Biden's been in Washington 47 years. Under her proposal to limit terms, Joe Biden would have been leaving the Senate at the time I got there. So I'm amused by her advocacy for a position on term limits that would have eliminated Joe Biden's career before I even got to the Senate. Look, the question is, who can be effective for Kentucky? There are 4 congressional leaders. I'm the only one not from New York or California. I allow Kentucky to punch above its weight. What does it mean to Kentucky? Over the last term, my last term, $17.5 billion for the Commonwealth that would not have been there had I not been the majority leader of the Senate.
Amen.
Give Kentucky an opportunity to punch above its weight on national issues and to bring home things for this state that it would not otherwise get.
Amen. That's the main reason to vote for it.
Senator McConnell likes to talk about Kentucky punching above its weight. Here in Kentucky, we feel like we've been sucker punched. We have the highest cancer rates in the country, highest rates of diabetes, highest rates of heart disease, some of the lowest wages in the country. Our economy hasn't been this bad since the Great Depression. It's just unbelievable. And if Senator McConnell would love to talk about term limits, I would love to talk about it, because you know what? President Trump is for congressional term limits. It's top on his agenda. And I agree with him on that. We should have them, and we should get them right now.
Senator McConnell.
Yeah, let's just take opioids, for example. $275 million that I directly brought into Kentucky for the opioid fight. $87 million of that was the largest grant the University of Kentucky has ever gotten. All of that was the outgrowth of two bipartisan bills passed, one of them back during the last 2 years of President Obama that I negotiated with him, called the 21st Century Cures Act. Then the CARES Act came later, and all of that I was deeply involved in negotiating that produced extraordinary results for the Commonwealth.
Meanwhile, you want to take away health care and Medicaid expansion, which covers 50% of Kentuckians who are addicted right now and giving them the treatment that they need. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I'll give you a few seconds, Senator, if you want to respond to that. That was a little bit out of order in time.
You mean to our ridiculous comment?
Yes.
No.
All right, we'll move on. You're watching the Kentucky debate. We are here with the Republican and Democratic candidates for the U.S. Senate in Kentucky, the U.S. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and retired Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath, and we are going through a series of questions, and they are answering those tonight for our audience watching across Kentucky and really around the country. The death of Breonna Taylor and the grand jury's decision has garnered national attention. It sparked more than 100 nights of protests in Louisville. Questions about racial injustice and what happened are on the minds of many of Kentucky's college students, we found out. And one UK student asked, do you think justice was done? Senator McConnell?
Well, I have great tolerance for peaceful demonstrations. They're protected constitutional rights. I don't have much tolerance for violence and looting. For example, in Portland, just last night, they went on a rampage again and tore down the statue of Teddy Roosevelt and Abraham Lincoln. With regard to the Taylor case, the law sometimes does not, as Judge Barrett pointed out in her hearing this morning, the result that we all hope for. This was an incredible tragedy, a botched job, a terrible outcome. But law enforcement has to apply the law, and they're doing the best they can. I don't have any advice to give them, but I think in terms of justice in America, we have to follow the laws that were written. I'm a strong supporter of law enforcement. I enjoy the support of the Fraternal Order of Police in Kentucky. I don't think it's appropriate to condemn all police officers. Some of them are bad, but it's not appropriate to defund the police or demonize police officers in general.
Time, Senator. Lieutenant Colonel McGrath.
Well, first of all, as somebody who wore the uniform, did 3 combat tours protecting our country, and the mother of 3 small children, I have to say that I'm never for looting or rioting or destruction of property or violence in any way. And I do not want to defund the police. That all said, you know, the tragedy with Breonna Taylor was an absolute tragedy. And I think leaders have to take a step back and recognize that we need change in this country, that there is systemic racism, that we have to tackle issues of equity and equality. I actually have a plan to do that. It's called Equality for All. And we put it together not just with me, but with leaders all around Kentucky. That's what you're supposed to do as a leader, to tackle these issues. Senator McConnell's not interested in that. You know, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act sitting on his desk, as is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act sitting on his desk. Violence Against Women Act sitting on his desk. I could go on and on.
Can we move on to this issue of police reform? Let's do that. Taylor's death and other cases like George Floyd in Minnesota have many Americans demanding police reform, changes in some way. Some are going as far as asking for, as you have both pointed out, the defunding of police departments. You both have gone on record here tonight against that. What reforms do you think should happen within police departments that should be led on a national level? Lieutenant Colonel McGrath.
Well, I think we should provide at a national level body cameras to all police. I think that's important. We have the technology to do that. I think there should be a national database for police officers. In other words, if you get dismissed from one police department, you don't get to go into another one without people knowing your record. And I always talk about the fact that, you know, you don't get kicked out of the U.S. Army and then get to roll into the U.S. Navy. These are common sense reforms that we need to do. In addition to, banning no-knock search warrants at the federal level for federal drug cases. I mean, I think these are all things that we can do, and it's just, to me, I think it comes down to, let's get our Senate back again so that we can actually debate these things. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, Senator McConnell wouldn't even allow debate on it. We can make change in this country, and we have to.
Senator McConnell, your response?
Yeah, there's a role for the federal government. I put on the floor of the Senate the Justice Act, which was drafted largely by Tim Scott, my Republican colleague from South Carolina, an African American himself, who's experienced the kind of extra suspicion that African Americans are frequently given. He crafted a bill that we thought made a lot of sense. I put it on the floor of the Senate. We couldn't get a single Democrat to even let us take it up and debate it and amend it. So here was another example of how Democrats in the Congress the last few months have not wanted anything to succeed. They've been slow walking everything that comes up, either by the House, putting up totally outrageous proposals, or Senate Democrats slow walking efforts to get an outcome. So I think what's happened here, which is not uncommon, in proximity to the election, our Democratic friends just simply don't want anything to occur that gets an actual outcome and a presidential signature.
Time, Senator. Lieutenant Colonel McGrath, a rebuttal?
I mean, you're hearing it all night long. More excuses. He's not just a member of the Senate. He's the Senate Majority Leader, and he still can't get it done. We know we need reforms. And I also want to work on not just criminal justice reform, but there are real inequities in this country. We have a $20 billion gap between majority white schools and majority non-white schools in this country. In Kentucky, we have 2.5 times the rate of black Kentuckians are dying at 2.5 times the rate of white Kentuckians. We've got to fix these things. We've got to be serious about them.
Time, Senator.
Yeah, I'm glad she brought up the fact that I'm the majority leader. If she goes to Washington, the first vote she'll cast in the Senate is to make Chuck Schumer from New York the majority leader, transferring the influence and power that Kentucky has now, because I'm one of the 4 leaders not from New York or California, to New York, further degrading Kentucky's influence in Washington, making it less likely Kentucky gets preferential treatment,
Amen.
like it frequently does as a result of my being in the position I'm in.
Okay.
That's what voting for her means, taking the majority leader title away from Kentucky and giving it to New York.
We
That's
here in
right.
Kentucky know better.
Terrible
Okay?
mistake.
Senator McConnell likes to talk about his clout and power. Meanwhile, co-pays are up. The price of prescription medication has gone up. The price of insurance has gone up. The price of housing has gone up. Our people with pre-existing conditions are about ready to be thrown off their health care right now. We have the worst economy since the Great Depression, the worst job losses since the Great Recession. We have the highest cancer rates in the country, highest rates of diabetes. Senator McConnell's clout is literally killing us in Kentucky.
Senator McConnell, additional response?
Yeah, I use my clout to help our state. Let's take coal, for example. Barack Obama destroyed the coal industry, completely destroyed it. And so I'm dealing with the collateral damage.